Coming up this week, S&P is going to finally include Tesla, GM's ambitious EV plans, Hyundai joins the Ionity charging network, and more. Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 41 of the EV Resource Podcast. I'm Zach Hurst, and each week I bring you the latest EV news, information, and answers to your questions about electric vehicles. Jumping right into it, our lead story this week is about Tesla. It looks like Tesla will indeed be included in the S&P 500. The S&P Dow Jones revealed on Monday that the automaker will indeed join the benchmark index on December 21st. And with a market cap of roughly $473 billion, Tesla will enter the index as one of the 10 most valuable members. This news ended months of speculation as to if and when Tesla would join the index, and bullish investors drove shares 13% higher on the day of the announcement. However, what could be bigger news for those that are Tesla stockholders or investors, the big players haven't really even entered the scene yet. Large cap mutual funds that track the S&P 500, most of them are waiting on the sideline, and that could fuel an even more massive demand for shares once Tesla finally joins the index. A team member of the S&P said, quote, "Of 189 large cap core funds in our universe, 157 funds that manage around $500 billion in assets under management do not currently hold Tesla on September 30th, end quote. Now, those funds are set to buy roughly $8 billion worth of shares, assuming that they aim to hold Tesla at a benchmark weight. Now, Tesla became eligible to join the index in July after reporting its fourth consecutive quarterly profit. The S&P 500 requires members to be based in the U.S., trade on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, boast a market cap of at least $8.2 billion, and post 4 straight quarters of profitability on a GAAP basis. If all the criteria are met, a group called the Index Committee deliberates on whether the company should replace a current member of the index. Of course, being S&P 500, they only have 500 members. S&P Dow Jones Indices has not yet revealed which of the members they're going to remove in order to make room for Tesla. Perhaps taking advantage of the positive news from the S&P inclusion, Tesla made a move this week to stop selling the $35,000 standard range version of the Model 3. Fred Lampert over at Electrac tells us long before ever delivering the Model 3, CEO Elon Musk promised that it would be an electric car for the masses with a price point starting at $35,000. While Tesla achieved mass production of the Model 3, that $35,000 price point has remained somewhat elusive. Tesla has over the years mentioned that $35,000 car many times, and finally they launched the standard range Model 3 for $35,000, delivering on a promise made long ago and proving all of the skeptics wrong. However, it wasn't long after they did that they moved away from that. After launching it, they stopped listing it on the website entirely or even producing that from the factory. But in order to be able to still say that they have a $35,000 Model 3 as promised, that they would sell the standard range plus that started at a little bit higher with some software locked features and a $3,000 discount. So what you had to do is buy the standard range plus Tesla and then tell them after the fact that you want the standard range, and they would remove some of the features. So kind of a backwards way of achieving that $35,000 goal. Now, Tesla said that given the popularity of the standard range plus, relative to the standard range with the features and the price point being so close, that they made the decision overall just to simplify production operations and better optimize costs. Sure, that makes sense, but it is somewhat of a backwards way to achieve that $35,000. So that off-the-menu $35,000 Model 3 has been available to Tesla buyers for the past year and a half, and some owners have indeed gone through the process and decided that that is the vehicle that they want. However, this week, Electrek learned that Tesla has decided to not even bother with that anymore for the new Model 3 vehicles that are set to come out as 2021 models. They say that sources familiar with the matter told Electrek that Tesla informed their staff that they weren't allowed to downgrade Model 3 Standard Range Plus vehicles anymore, and they're not going to sell them for that $35,000 price point. They are still allowed to software limit features on 2020 Model 3 Standard Range Plus vehicles that are still in inventory, and then sell those to customers as Model 3 Standard Range vehicles for $35,000, but they aren't going to be doing that for the 2021 Model 3 vehicles that have the refresh that I've talked about in past episodes. Tesla continued to make news this week, joining 27 other companies in the electric vehicle industry, including big names like Lucid and Rivian, to join forces with each other and create a new organization called ZETA. Their goal, simply, is to push for 100% electric vehicle sales by 2030. Now, several markets have already recently announced plans to move new car sales to electric vehicles only. These initiatives, also referred to as bans on the sale of new gasoline-powered vehicles, have taken many forms on many different timelines, and I've talked about that previously on the podcast. Most recently, of course, we saw California move to put a ban in place on new gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles by 2035, and then they've actually moved that up to 2030. So ZETA, the 28 companies in the EV business, are asking for an even bigger goal to be put in place nationwide. 100% electric vehicle sales throughout the light, medium, and heavy-duty sectors by 2030. This is a very ambitious plan, and of course, it has been met with a lot of skepticism, but ultimately, this is what is better for public health, of course, environmental concerns, economic concerns, and so many other reasons why, of course, I always say, we should push towards EVs. So they created what they're calling the Zero Emission Transportation Association, ZETA, to push that effort on a national level. Now, Joe Britton, who spent 15 years working in the U.S. Senate, has been named the executive director of ZETA, and he had a few comments to share. He said, quote, "For the first time in a generation, transportation is the leading emitter of U.S. carbon emissions. By embracing electric vehicles, federal policymakers can help drive innovation, create hundreds of thousands of new jobs, and improve air quality and public health. ZETA's formation recognizes a pivotal moment for national leadership and reflects the will of the growing clean transportation sector." He continues, "The next decade will be critical in implementing federal policies that accelerate the transition to zero-emission vehicles and help address these problems head-on. The clean vehicle sector already boasts hundreds of thousands of jobs, but if we encourage its growth, the United States can decisively win the global race to develop a new, clean transportation economy and employ hundreds of thousands of Americans right here at home." So there are 5 points that ZETA is really focusing on to push as an organization. The first, outcome-driven consumer EV incentives. Point-of-sale consumer EV incentives drive adoption, provide cost reductions, and achieve real results in pushing transportation electrification. In addition, incentivizing early retirement of gas-powered cars while encouraging EV adoption will speed the transition and meet the urgency of the moment. Second, emissions and performance standards enabling full electrification by 2030. Emission targets are a key piece of protecting public health and sending the correct market signals to support and accelerate the transportation to zero-emission transportation. Third, infrastructure investments. Strong federal charging infrastructure investments will drive the electric transportation transition and ensure that the United States is leading the way in clean recovery where everyone is better off. Fourth, domestic manufacturing. They believe we should not only accelerate U.S. transportation and electrification, but also work to ensure that we secure domestic economic growth and leadership in EV manufacturing. Federal policies here must encourage job creation within the United States and economic activity across the entire EV supply chain and life cycle, from critical materials all the way to vehicles. And then finally, fifth, federal leadership and cooperation with subnational entities being states. Federal support should invest in research and development, provide an aligned vision for electrification, and ensure that local leaders are empowered with the expertise and resources to support full vehicle electrification. In general, I think that it's very natural for a formation of this type of association to happen. It was only a matter of time with a lot of the major players, the existing players in the automobile industry, really fighting EVs tooth and nail. It was only a matter of time before you had some major organized opposition to that. So I'm going to go ahead and read you the full list of the members of ZETA. They are ABB, of course, we know as maker of EV chargers, Albemarle Corporation, Arrival, ChargePoint, Con Edison, Copper Development Association Incorporated, Duke Energy, Edison International, NLX, EV Box, EV Go, Ioneer, Li-Cycle, or lithium-ion cycle, Li-Cycle, Lordstown Motors, Lucid Motors, Piedmont Lithium, PG&E Corporation, Proterra, Redwood Materials. Of course, Redwood Materials would be the recycling of the EV battery recycling company that J.B. Straubel started. Rivian, which we know, Siemens, Southern Company, SRP, Tesla, Vistra, Volta, Uber, which I think is really great to see Uber on this list, and Wave. So obviously you've got companies that represent a large swath of the EV or associated industries there. All of these companies, you can easily say, have a forward-looking, future-oriented strategy. They recognize that this is something that is a public health emergency. Never before in our lives have we been so significantly affected by automobile emissions on a national level. So this is great that they are finally going to collectively organize and lobby for some major policy changes. Now, one company that is suspiciously not on that list and has also supported stripping California of their tough emissions standards is General Motors. Going their own way, GM says that it is on its way to an all-electric future with a commitment to 30 new global electric vehicles by 2025. They say on their website, quote, "We are aggressively going after every aspect of what it takes to put everyone in an EV because we need millions of EVs on the road to make a meaningful impact towards building a zero-emissions future. GM is positioned to design, engineer, and produce EVs for every style and price point, and we are rapidly building a competitive advantage in batteries, software, vehicle integration, manufacturing, and customer experience," end quote. General Motors announced Thursday it was dumping more money into its electrification plans and would be accelerating its production to release more electric vehicles sooner than expected, according to an article from The Verge. Speaking at a conference hosted by Barclays, GM's CEO Mary Barra said the company would spend $27 billion on electric and autonomous vehicles through 2025, up from the $20 billion it announced before the pandemic. Also, by 2025, GM will launch 30 new electric vehicles around the world, more than two-thirds of which will be available in North America, which is great news because previously we thought everything was going to be in China, which is great for China, but obviously we want things here too. The new vehicles will span GM's entire brand portfolio, including Cadillac, Buick, GMC, and Chevy, and will come in a range of prices. Previously, GM had said that it would release 20 EVs by 2023, though those were expected to go to China, where obviously the demand for electric vehicles is much higher thanks to stricter emissions rules. Now, here in North America, GM has unveiled two new EVs in the last couple months, the Cadillac Lyriq SUV, which is expected to go on into production in late 2022, and of course, one that I've talked about very recently, the GMC Hummer EV, slated for late 2021. But GM has been criticized for bringing vehicles to market too late, while other auto manufacturers are racing to get their EVs to customers much sooner, like Rivian, or even Lordstown Motors, that they're going to be starting their production next year. Of course, Tesla with the Cybertruck supposed to be starting next year. They've got to get the factory built. But, you know, GM tends to just be a little bit slower in doing things. Now, has that mattered? Well, yeah, it really has. I mean, GM's sales of the Bolt, well, anybody's sales of EVs pale in comparison in North America to Tesla. So it seems like they really haven't taken this very seriously. All of these claims, personally, I'm kind of taking with a grain of salt. I don't want to be cynical, but I'm certainly going to be skeptical about their plans until I actually see it happening, which I hope I do. I hope we all see this happening. I mean, to have 20 new EVs on the road in North America, 30 globally, would be great for GM, but also great for everybody. Now, Mary Barra said in a statement, quote, "Climate change is very real, and we want to be part of the solution by putting everyone in an electric vehicle. We are transitioning to an all-electric portfolio from a position of strength, and we're focused on growth. We can accelerate our EV plans because we are rapidly building a competitive advantage in batteries, software, vehicle integration, manufacturing, and customer experience," end quote. Now, this news is meant to convince investors on Wall Street who have been kind of jittery about GM's ability to catch up to Tesla, which really, as I mentioned, has been the only automaker that has successfully built an EV business over the past few years. And the legacy automakers are stepping up their own EV plans, of course. They keep talking about it. Ford expects to start delivering their Mustang Mach-E to customers by the end of the year. It looks like they are doing well with that. This past weekend, I recently saw the Mach-E in person. It looks like what you could expect from Ford. And then, of course, Volkswagen is going to produce the ID.4 SUV that has been delayed now to Q1 of next year versus the end of this year. But even still, that's not much of a delay. And certainly that is, I expect, going to be a vehicle that sells really well here in North America. So they've got some competition, but GM also said that it's bolstering its estimates about its scalable Ultium battery architecture thanks to what they call engineering advances. They say now that they anticipate getting 450 miles of range out of its Ultium batteries on a full charge, up from previously estimated range of 400 miles. However, that doesn't talk about battery pack size. I could get 1,000 miles of range out of a battery pack, regardless of the technology. I can say that. The battery pack would have to be massive. GM also said that it was already working on its second generation version of the Ultium batteries, which is projected to deliver twice the energy density at less than half the cost of today's chemistry. GM said that the next gen version of Ultium will cost 60% less than the batteries that they are using today. The company is prototype testing this next generation battery technology, which is expected to be available mid-decade. Well, Tesla fans, that should kind of sound very similar to what the announcements that Tesla made at their battery day with the tabless cell. It's, like I said, I'm skeptical. And I'm probably a little bit more than that. I probably am cynical, but I drive a GM electric vehicle, and it's pretty good. I mean, it recently got me on a road trip for 550 miles when it's only supposed to have an 82-mile range. So it's not that GM doesn't have the ability to make great EVs. I'm sure they do. We just need more of it. And it looks like, or sounds like, that is what they're planning, which is great. The second to last story I have for you this week comes from Clean Technica about Hyundai joining the Ionity charging network. Hyundai Motor Group has joined the European ultra-fast charging network Ionity, which is one of the most useful and widespread charging networks originally created to provide a supercharger-like network for non-Tesla electric vehicles. Now, becoming a shareholder and strategic partner in Ionity, Hyundai and Kia are now providing extra funding to help the network grow faster. And while the Ionity network isn't quite as extensive and convenient or as affordable as the Tesla supercharger network, one great benefit that is often forgotten is that Ionity chargers are providing electricity that is sourced from 100% renewable energy. Thomas Chimera, Executive Vice President and Head of Product Division at Hyundai Motor Group, said, quote, "For Hyundai and Kia, product and customer experience is closely related to convenience and real benefits. By investing in Ionity, we are now part of the most comprehensive charging infrastructure networks in Europe. We are committed to provide holistic solutions to make it easier than ever for people to make the switch to eco-mobility," end quote. The CEO of Ionity, Michael Hajesh, I'm butchering that. I'm sorry. Anyway, the CEO of Ionity welcomed Hyundai by saying, quote, "With the addition of Hyundai Motor Group, we welcome aboard a committed partner with international experience in the field of electric mobility. From today, we will jointly pursue the goal of educating people about e-mobility, promoting innovations in this area in order to make traveling with electric vehicles the new normal, especially on long journeys," end quote. The list of partners in the Ionity joint venture now include BMW Group, Mercedes-Benz AG, Ford Motor Company, Volkswagen Group, and that does include Audi and Porsche as well, and of course now Hyundai Motor Group, being Hyundai and Kia. So just like any other large group, adding more members just means that you add more money. It increases the stability and ultimately the chances of success. At this point, it does look like Ionity is not going to go anywhere. It is here to stay, and they provide a great, valuable resource for those EV owners that want to take some longer road trips in Europe. So great news, and we need more of it. The last bit of news I have for you this week is about Lordstown Motors. Now, personally, I have started to be much more interested in Lordstown and their Endurance EV pickup truck. Last week, I actually had the opportunity to see, touch, feel their pre-production alpha prototype of the Endurance. So it makes it more real instead of something that you just read about or see or hear about, to actually have it right in front of you. So don't be surprised if I'm bringing you more and more news and information about Lordstown, as it is something that I am getting more excited about. Now, Lordstown did say that early reservations for its all-electric Endurance pickup truck were strong, and that it plans to double hiring by the end of this year, which sent their shares of stock up 27%. And full disclosure, I do have one share of RIDE, RIDE, which of course is Lordstown Motors, because I believe in the company, and I'll probably hold that, who knows, forever. Now, they have said that they have received 50,000 non-binding production reservations for the Endurance, which, if you don't know, it's not targeted towards like you or me or Joe down the street, that drives a pickup truck. They are really targeting this towards commercial fleets, which I think is a really smart move, because I haven't seen anybody else in the EV space yet actually going after what seems to be a really lucrative market. I mean, that's got to have Ford really worried, because the F-150 is what is generally looked at when thinking about fleet vehicles. So Lordstown going after that is awesome, and it probably explains why their average order size is approximately 500 vehicles. Now, last month, Lordstown went public through their acquisition or reverse merger, I guess as we're calling it, with a SPAC, or a SPAC, Special Purpose Acquisition Company. And that has, if there's anything in the stock world this year related to EVs, it's with these SPACs. I mean, this year, it seems like it's been happening a lot. Now, Lordstown's CEO, Steve Burns, said, quote, "We continue to make significant progress across all fronts, and we are excited to reveal those developments with the investment community and future customers today." Now, the Lordstown Endurance, they are, and this is what they told me last week too, that they are expecting to begin deliveries in Q3 or Q4 of next year. So kind of fall, maybe September 2021, and then ramping production from then on, through 2022. They're expecting to produce 40 or 50 beta prototype vehicles beginning in early next year to be used for crash testing, engineering, and validation testing. Now, in order to do that, as I mentioned, they are in the process of doubling their employees to 500 by the end of the year, and then following that, tripling it by the end of next year to 1,500 employees. So still a really small company, but looking to do really big things. So as you can tell, I'm excited about it. I will actually, in the next month's magazine, I'm probably going to do a very specific write-up. I did add a little blurb last month for the EV trucks issue. But, the Endurance is somewhat unique in many ways. And so I'm going to really focus on bringing those details to you. So that's it for the news this week. I have been getting so many questions about EVs and cold weather. I still need to make a specific video on that. So it's in the works. I'm working on it. It's taking a decent amount of time, and I don't have a whole lot of time to do that and everything else that I've got planned. But I will be on it. And of course, when I release that video, if you're a subscriber on the YouTube channel, you'll get notified about that. Otherwise, I will tell you about it here on the podcast. But I do want to thank everyone for the outpouring of support. It seems like EV Resource is getting a lot more attention these days, which of course is fantastic, because ultimately the more visible we are, the more people we can influence to go out there and make the switch to electric vehicles. So that exposure, if you will, accelerates our mission, which is really just to get more people driving EVs. With the Lordstown Endurance, I did a walk around video, posted that on YouTube. It was picked up by Inside EVs. So that's great. That I want to make sure that what I'm putting out there is valuable. And obviously, I think it was Mark Kane over at Inside EVs felt like that was valuable enough to share with all of their audience. So that's great. The last weekend, I went on a 550-mile road trip with my Chevy Spark EV, put a video up about that. So check that out. If you're on YouTube, you can go and take a look at that. I think the purpose of that trip really was just to prove that it's possible. The Spark EV is not designed to be a road trip car. But if you have a low mileage EV, the infrastructure is starting to get there. Here in North America, the infrastructure is being built out. So even with a small range on the highway, I could only go about 50 miles. Didn't matter. We were able to do it. It was a very relaxing and enjoyable trip. So you can check out that video. But really, just the best way to support EV Resource, if you're able, is with Patreon. That is really just us asking for a financial support. This is something that it's basically me, and I've got a partner, but he's really behind the scenes. So it's basically me, and any support that you guys are able or willing to provide is certainly appreciated. You can check us out on Patreon. It's patreon.com/EV Resource. Our executive producer on Patreon, thank you so much, is Tom Wiggins. Tom, as a part of that tier, gets his name read out at the end of each week's podcast. There are other tiers. You can be a producer, like James Hart is our producer. We've only got one of those two. We're small. Give it time. But, at each tier level, I'm trying to bring some added benefits. And then, of course, at every tier, everybody gets full access to the monthly EV Resource magazine, which I really get excited about the magazine. I think it's a great value for what you're getting. Of course, I always want to thank our partner of the podcast, Titan Auto and Tire, for their support. Titan is one of the very few independent shops in Central Virginia that are actually qualified. They went through and got the qualification to work on hybrids and EVs. Now, they are a traditional shop, so ultimately from hybrids to Hummers, they really can fix everything. So if you're in Central Virginia, you've got a hybrid or an EV or even just a gas car, but you're listening to this podcast because you're interested in electric vehicles, go take it to Titan. They will treat you really well. I take all of my vehicles over to Titan, and they've never done me wrong. They are knowledgeable, friendly, and they do good work. I do invite your feedback for the podcast or YouTube or really anything you want to talk about. Send me an email. You can reach me at hello@ev-resource.com, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube videos. And don't forget to subscribe. That way, either on YouTube or the podcast platforms, because then you'll get future shows delivered to you automatically. You don't have to search for EV Resource every week when the podcast comes out. You'll get a notification, or it'll be downloaded automatically. If you want to listen to any of the previous podcast shows, you can find them on the podcast section of our webpage or on your favorite podcast app. like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or really any of the others. We're on Spotify, and gosh, I don't even remember the whole list. But Buzzsprout, who I used actually for the hosting of the podcast, they actually put it out to all of the connected provider platforms. So I don't even really pay attention to that anymore. I upload it to Buzzsprout and it goes out to everybody else. They make it super easy. And that's something I've never actually mentioned on the podcast before. If you guys are interested in starting your own podcast, I just started this in February, so it hasn't even been a full year. If you have something that you want to talk about or share in podcast form, I'm going to put in the show notes a little referral link. And if you click on that link and use Buzzsprout for your podcast hosting, I believe, I don't even remember what it is exactly, but I believe you get a little something and I get a little something. So use the referral link if that's something that you're interested in doing. But that is all for the closing bits. So that is your show this week. I appreciate all of you for watching and listening. Thank you very much. And I'll catch you next time.